I look at the Republican Party and I see a party in absolute disarray right now. They're on the internet fighting Nick Fuentes while the government shut down and they're doing nothing and they don't have any plan. And Donald Trump is now calling the senators to breakfast so he can berate them about how they won't use the nuclear option, which I've been calling for since all the way back in February, and which, quite frankly, I don't think they even can do. So it looks like a complete and utter mess. And what did we actually see at the ballot box yesterday? Well, in places like New Jersey, Jack Ciattarelli did expand upon his 2021 vote turnout, but it was nothing like just 2024, just a year ago, when Donald Trump flooded the polls with a whole lot of crossover Democrats and independents. So again, I look at what Trump's doing and I say, you know what? I think he's trying to deliver on his agenda. It's a little scattershot. It's a little chaotic, but I look at the Republican Party, who swore that they would back him up and deliver on the MAGA agenda that had been given a mandate. And they're just MIA. They're just completely outclassed by Democrats. They have absolutely no path forward. There's no unity. They're a mess.
All right, guys, not a good night. Not a good night. That's all I'll say on this. I mean, it was not good. Mamdani wins. Socialism headed to New York City. Abigail Spanberger, big win in Virginia and carries Jay Jones over the finish line. And then New Jersey, big win for Mikie Sherrill. What went wrong? What are those lessons learned? Where did we get the take our eye off the ball? Mark Mitchell of Rasmussen reports, my guys, he has got a take that you are not going to believe. This is a must watch. Everyone's out there with their punditry. Oh, this turnout, that turnout. You want to know what's going on? We're about to tell you. And it's not what you're hearing anywhere else. Trust me when I tell you that, because it's unbelievable. We are, by the way, at day 36 of the shutdown, longest now in history. And President Trump arguing in court today at the Supreme Court for his tariffs. Make it very clear this is a life or death situation. And the amount of money that we've taken in, it kind of is. It's a big deal. I'll have a lot to say on this later. Curtis Houck of the Media Research Center will analyze the media take on this. And then, as I said, Mark Mitchell from Rasmussen Report coming right up to give us a take that no one else is going to give you on what happened last night in the election. Tomorrow, great panel with Kay Smythe, Link Lauren, and Amber Duke. And then Friday, Victor Davis Hanson. By the way, thank you to everybody that's going across platforms. Last night, we had a great YouTube Live. It was aired on Twitter as well. Loved everybody who joined with Tan Turntine and myself and Batya Ungar Sargon. But remember, if you're a video person, that's awesome. Thank you. Subscribe, share, appreciate it. But also go to the audio version, because it's great to have a backup on Apple or Spotify. And frankly, let's be honest, it helps me. So if for nothing else, it doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't matter. Just go hit that subscribe and 5-star notification. It's super helpful to the show, and it's a great backup. You're at the gym, you're out working, you can always listen to the show or in the car. All right, before I bring in Mark Mitchell or Rasmussen, guys, if you are trying to quit smoking or vaping or anything like that, I got to recommend these to you. These are Zippix nicotine-infused toothpicks. They are the convenient, great-tasting way to be able to get that nicotine fix if you can't vape or smoke. So maybe you're in a meeting, you're indoors, you're in a plane. If you got it, or you're just trying to quit, which I'm a big fan of, they're available in 6 long-lasting flavors in both the 2 milligram and the 3 milligram states. They're perfect. Like I said, if you're in a restaurant, in a meeting somewhere, and it's inappropriate or not allowed, then you can grab one of these Zippix sticks. And by the way, if nicotine is not your thing, right, which is great, then they've got these energy versions as well. So if you're just looking for a pick-me-up but don't want to down some energy drink, they've got the energy versions as well. And this one's got, this is bourbon flavored. They've got one that's spearmint flavored and cinnamon, and they've got a watermelon peppermint one. So whatever your flavor that you like, Zippix has it. You can get them online at zippixtoothpicks.com. It's Zippix, zippixtoothpicks.com. Use code Sean, SEAN, for 10% off your first order. That's zippixtoothpicks.com. Use code Sean, Zippix, toothpicks.com. All right, guys, after you're done with that, if you're ready for a great snack, and I did this last night, you know what I'm going to tell you. My masa chips. This is the go-to snack that I love now. These things are unbelievable. They're tastier, they're crunchier. And here's the thing. Back in the day, all snack foods were like cooked in beef tallow, and then they went to these seed oils. And you can tell after you have some snack food, you know what I'm talking about. You'll feel that bloat. That uneasiness in your tummy, but you don't have to if you're choosing masa chips. They've got 3 ingredients: tallow, right, which is the good stuff, salt, and corn. That's it. No seed oils. It leaves you feeling much more energized, less bloating, light, energetic, whatever. I love these things. Big pro tip right here, right now. When I started Masa Chips, I ordered the variety pack because they've got blue, original, lime, habanero, a ton more. They are beloved by thousands in the Maha movement for a reason, because they are tastier, they are crunchier, they're great for dipping if you're a guac or a salsa person. Once you try Masa Chips, they're going to replace everything that you use right now. If you want to give them a try, go to masachips.com/Sean, Masa, M-A-S-A, chips.com/Sean, and use code Sean, S-E-A-N, for 25% off. It's like Black Friday came early. Masachips.com/Sean. All right, it's my pleasure to introduce the head pollster at Rasmussen Reports, Mr. Mark Mitchell. Mark, good to see you again. Give me your top lines on what we should think about how yesterday went.
Well, a lot of people are going to say, oh, blue states, we didn't expect to win those, and so it doesn't mean anything. And I think nothing could be further from the truth, because I look at the Republican Party and I see a party in absolute disarray right now. They're on the internet fighting Nick Fuentes while the government shut down, and they're doing nothing, and they don't have any plan. And Donald Trump is now calling the senators to breakfast so he can berate them about how they won't use the nuclear option, which I've been calling for since all the way back in February, and which, quite frankly, I don't think they even can do. So it looks like a complete and utter mess. And what did we actually see at the ballot box yesterday? Well, in places like New Jersey, Jack Ciattarelli did expand upon his 2021 vote turnout, but it was nothing like just 2024, just a year ago, when Donald Trump flooded the polls with a whole lot of crossover Democrats and independents. So again, I look at what Trump's doing and I say, you know what? I think he's trying to deliver on his agenda. It's a little scattershot. It's a little chaotic, but I look at the Republican Party, who swore that they would back him up and deliver on the MAGA agenda that had been given a mandate. And they're just MIA. They're just completely outclassed by Democrats. They have absolutely no path forward. There's no unity. They're a mess. Right, I wonder if they even have 40 votes for the filibuster overriding in the Senate. I wonder even if that.
I want to get to that in a second, because that's fascinating. But I do want to start with New Jersey. So the takeaway is, I want you to walk me through this. Ciattarelli came within 3 last time, but this time he got more votes, just a smaller margin, correct?
He got, I haven't seen the final vote count, but I hear he expanded on he got 1.3 million in 2021. I think he's going to be in the 1.4, 1.5 range. Donald Trump got 2 million back just a year ago. So you look and people have said, well, Jack Ciattarelli is a good candidate. He's outperforming Trump in his state. Well, yeah, in an off-cycle election. But the problem is that Trump is back in office now, and that makes a lot of people want to resist Trump. And those people turned out to the polls. And in New Jersey, Trump benefited from a lot of crossover Democrat and independent votes. Those people didn't turn out. And Trump has been hemorrhaging independent support as far back as basically right after the One Big Beautiful Bill. I called this out and everybody called me a doomer. They said I was undermining the movement. And I said, no, people don't believe you about the Epstein case. You got to fix this. And they didn't, and it didn't go away. And now they're doing the same thing with the government shutdown. They literally handed the Democrats a government shutdown during an election where, again, is it critical wins for Republicans? No. But they certainly didn't cement the narrative that the country is moving to the right. And I'm here to rain on that parade. The country is not moving to the right. Ubiquitously on almost every issue, the Overton window is moving left because the radical wing of the Democrat Party has taken over, and they've made all of these things ubiquitous. Even the LGBT stuff, believe it or not, the Republicans are losing ground on this. And then they like to pat themselves on the back and say, well, look at the Zoomers. They're so much more right wing than any other generation before them. It's like, well, no, not really. Like, they voted for Trump, but they would vote for a socialist next. They're super socialistic, even the Trump voters, on all these questions we ask. And really what they want to do is burn the system down. And overwhelmingly, all voters said that they wanted massive change in Washington, D.C. by like a 75 to 20 point margin instead of business as usual. And I'm sorry, like, they're nice people, but the Republicans are delivering America business as usual. This idea that like traditional conservative values are going to sell to a generation that had their future stolen from them is not going to work. Like, they don't want to hear the boomer argument. You got to pull yourself up from the bootstraps. They're going to rebel against that, just like they're rebelling against people like Mark Levin right now that are trying to clutch pearls about, quite frankly, what I think is, edgelord behavior on an internet culture, which most people don't even understand the internet culture and leadership. So that's where we're at. I think it's a tough situation, and I don't see a way for the Republican Party to get out of it with the current paradigm.
All right, so 2 questions. One, was there anything that Jack Ciattarelli could have done to win? And 2, when you say that explain what you think is happening with the party. Who and what needs to lead that? Is this a Trump thing that he needs to lead out? Is this a Mike Johnson, John Thune thing? Like, who is the one that could say, I heard Mark Mitchell, I get it, I agree with him, and we need to move forward? Who is that person? Because to me, it seems like the only one is Trump. But like, take those in order, if you will. Is there anything that Shinrelli could have done differently to win, or was the die cast on that?
It's a blue state. And he ran a pretty good campaign. I think he was a better candidate than Mikie Sherrill in many ways. But a blue state wants blue state things. And they don't see the issues the same way as us. And it's a problem. Like, no, I don't think Republicans could have won. They could have done better. But also at the same time, I hear a lot of stories. And I've polled for states. I've polled for bluish states like Minnesota and Colorado. And what I hear from MAGA candidates out there is, well, my establishment Republican is completely MIA. They have no idea. They basically just run from Democrats all day and try not to get painted as racists. And I think I could do good as a MAGA candidate. And the polling shows, yes, people want a MAGA candidate more than a traditional Republican. But then they say, well, I can't get through to the administration. Nobody's going to give me money. I don't know how to run. Like, how do I message? Where's all my support? And there is none. And so the question I would ask, like, I'd throw it back to you, is that if some miraculous trillionaire who actually wanted to use their money for the voters and not for their own special interests, I know that that's strange. And they said, well, I want to give $1 billion to try to save America. Like, who would they even give that to? And I don't think we have an answer to that. You could give it to the Trump campaign, but he's not running again. Right. You could give it to the RNC, and it's going to get siphoned off into like consulting bucks. You could give it to the NRSC, and it's going to be used as like leverage over people in order to get establishment candidates to run for big business interests so that we can have more H-1Bs. Like, I really don't know. Where would you give that money? Like, the candidate themselves, and they'd have a lot of money, but then they would still have the establishment vendors who are like, oh, you got to spend it this way and you got to run this way. And it's not the fingers on the pulse of America. America is getting a very weird mix of violent, nihilistic, and mad. And especially the young people, I don't know where it's going to go, but I've been calling it burn it down politics. And everybody in DC doesn't want to burn it down at all because they're pretty happy with the status quo. America PAC, I don't even think America PAC, because America PAC's a front for basically the tech bro, expansionist immigration policies that have literally screwed over the Zoomers more than anything. If you wanted to fix the problems in America, like everybody says, prices, prices, prices. But we know that our system's allergic to reducing prices. It can't stand deflation. It would destroy the banking industry. Everybody would freak out. And there's really no way to even do that. I don't even know how you do that. So what can you do in order to fix that? Well, it's wage stagnation. And who gave us wage stagnation? Well, it wasn't the Democrats. It was the Republican big business interests with globalists and the Club for Growth. And we all know this. That's why the Zoomers are hurting right now. So I don't think they all know this specifically, but they have reasons to be mistrustful of a capitalist system that has completely failed them. If you wanted to fix it overnight, what you could do is just cancel every visa, send them all back. It could be our new national project. Instead of sending people to Mars, we could teach the Zoomers to code. We have the coding boot camps. That's 2.6 million temporary workers, $350 billion of annual economic benefits that would go to domestic workers and not foreign workers, and it would probably create utter chaos. It would spike the cost of wages for business. But you know what? Like, that's where we're at right now. It's, the pie is shrinking and the people are going to lose. And you're looking right now, again, on the issue specifically of Israel, a very big break between the Zoomers and the Boomers. And the Boomers are just punching down at the Zoomers, and the Zoomers are rebelling. And nobody's really winning here. So this is the future, burn it down politics. I think J.D. Vance has presented sort of like, hopefully the best way to trace those, like through those wickets, like thread the needle. But even what he was saying is things that are like, it's reasonable to be a little bit identitarianism. It's reasonable to say we need to stop legal immigration because we've taken too much. And I think even those things are an anathema to basically every single organization that takes money in Washington, D.C. Look at the Heritage Foundation. The Heritage Foundation tries to make a move towards MAGA, and they're going after that guy's scalp because of like basically mud splattering from this slugfest that's not helping anybody about a person that they're trying to cancel who represents a movement they want to ignore. So it's a complete mess. And I've been saying this for a long time. They call me a doomer. And here's the election. Like the independents didn't turn out. And the independents, I saw the approval rating. It was negative 27, like, 2 days ago. And here we are.
Boomers, Zoomers, and we've got Mark Mitchell, the Doomer. But by the way, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but I just got to say it because it was interesting. I was getting in an Uber the other day. This guy was saying to me, the driver, he's very involved in like the gig economy, and he said, "Hey, just so you know, all this AI stuff, the Waymo cars," he goes, they're basically at the water's edge waiting to get unloaded. And those are those driverless cars. He said, so, I mean, the reason I say this, to your point about people's jobs, all the people that are kind of like in the gig economy, this AI stuff, driverless, that's going to start taking away a lot of these other people's jobs who have been getting by through DoorDash and Uber and everything. And so, like, to your point, if you don't start to address this at a macro level and about what's really going on, it's going to happen, to your point, either sooner rather than later, because at some point, it's just going to happen. They're going to release these cars into the cities. All those jobs are going to go away, and people are going to go, where do I go? But let me get back to the question I asked you, Mark. Can this be solved? Is there somebody is it Trump or is it a congressional? Somebody, to your point, has to be the person that says, hey, I heard Mark Mitchell. He's got a point. We got to do something. Who is that?
Yeah, I really don't know. I mean, I know that some of my polling gets to the Trump administration. I'm in the field with economic populist stuff. I gave them economic populist stuff before. Like, this is really the problem, is that everybody's not acknowledging here that capitalism failed. And so when you ask the society, well, do you prefer socialism to capitalism? They still say capitalism by a lot. But then when you say, well, if AI takes away jobs, like, do you support or oppose UBI? And everybody under 40, like, overwhelmingly says, yeah, sure, let's do it. And they perceive, everybody wants economic populism now, but they perceive that the Democrat Party is the party of economic populism, not the Republicans. And you know what? They're right. And so it comes down to the system has failed. Everything's failed. This is the fourth turning. All the institutions are crumbling around us. Like, we literally can't educate children. Our colleges are a joke. They're just saddling people with more debt because of predatory lending practices. The military was hollowed out. Thankfully, we're trying to restore some of that. I wonder how far we'll be able to do. Like, literally name everything. I can't send my kids to Boy Scouts. Everything has been corrupted. And history tells us that pendulum swings back, and it's usually a bottom-up like pull, and it's not a top-down push. And I think Donald Trump was kind of like maybe this last gasp of a top-down push, and I guess we didn't push hard enough or whatever. So what's going to happen is just society is going to realign. And right now, unfortunately, I think authenticity matters, and I think the Democrats have figured out a way to run on an authentic platform that sucks but is winning. And that's like this idea that we can all hug and there's enough money for everybody, and it's called Democratic-Socialism. And even the people who voted for Trump under 40 in 2024 were only split on Democratic Socialism, like 43 to 44. So it's a siren song, and unfortunately traditional conservative values do not enter into it. The Zoomers have already been lost. Like, people say, oh, they need to learn history. Well, you didn't teach it to them, bro. These people don't really care about traditional Western values. They don't really think traditional marriage is all that great. They have a high incidence of mental health problems. I mean, I could just go on. Their dating scene is completely messed up. So many of the young single men have completely given up. The women are like raging feminists that don't want to procreate and have families. It's really, really, really dark. And so no manner of like raging at these people is going to prevent the impending wave of like they are taking over. And again, you're seeing it on Israel. Only 21% of people under 30 support Israel, but it's 59% of people over 65. It's even more of Republicans over 65. And they're literally just trying to throw a temper tantrum. And Mark Levin is getting owned on Twitter by Nick Fuentes, who is now like the rising ascendant star of the right. He's not a guy relegated to an echo chamber anymore, and they can't even acknowledge that this is like a gun held to the Republican Party's head now, that they have no idea what to do with. So again, I really don't know. If I were, I made a recommendation to JD Vance. It's like there probably needs to be a new donor pipeline. There probably needs to be some central structure to replace what MAGA is, because I think MAGA is just whatever comes off the top of Trump's head. Like, he's an intuitive leader, right? But he's, I'm going to make some enemies here, but he's got limited political capital. He's -8 approval rating this week. And that's not horrible, but it should be better. And it doesn't really bode well for 2026. And, people are going to start looking forward to the future. And people supported him maybe back in the spring for a 2028 run more than you would expect. But I think people are going to look for new blood. I mean, we're talking about going up against Zohran Mamdani, and just saying, "Oh, he's a socialist," isn't enough to convince people under 40 that somehow there's this alternative value set that they never really were taught, and they're just expected to buy into them, and yet it's failed them. So maybe there needs to be some centralization. The Republican Party has no plan at all for these like quasi blue areas. It doesn't have a platform that these people can run on that actually has courage. But the entire, state and county Republican infrastructure is people who just pragmatically try to win on as little substance as possible. I've talked to these people. And again, Jack ran like a good campaign, said a lot of good things, but ultimately, property taxes were a big deal in New Jersey, and yet they still voted for the Democrat. They're all in on this blue state system. And even in the Republican states, the Republicans aren't all in on a new, different version of the future. It's like voters want things like voter ID and paper ballots, and not a single Republican state has done that. Like, why? Like, what are the Republican states doing as a counterpoint? And the calls are going to be like, look at Mamdani. We can't let the capitalist banking sector, the capital of the world, fall into the hands of a socialist. Well, what's going to happen is, if Trump gets involved, they're just going to want to resist Trump harder, and they're going to make him even more of like a martyr. And the counterpoint, the way to move the Overton window back to the right, is to do as many based things as you can do in Republican states. And I don't feel a lot of like pressure out of the state legislatures to do that. There was a really good article about SNAP that came out in The Guardian about this back in March, about how Big Soda was trying to like subvert the government in order to keep soda on SNAP. And it's a really good look at how like the Republican influence network works. And the article just sort of glossed over how easy it was to purchase Washington, D.C. Republicans, like barely an inconvenience. They literally just, said, hey, like they flexed their checkbook. That was it. But the problem is that, okay, well, now a couple of state legislatures are trying to remove soda from SNAP. That's a problem. That's harder to go after. So they actually like enlisted some Republican, consultants, people in the Beltway, lobbyists. Then they found a research organization. They paid them $2 million for polling. They got back polling that says, oh, miraculously, Republicans like the idea of people purchasing soda on SNAP. And I found the exact opposite. So then they run that to the Republican governors who veto. So we're talking about a Republican policy in a Republican state, a Republican legislature shot down by a Republican governor because a fake Republican poll paid for by Republican big business interests wanted to enrich themselves on the back of the taxpayer. It's freaking corporate welfare. And nobody's calling it out. It's just the way Republicans do business. So that's not going to work. And they have to rapidly purify, because they're going up against a very pure movement. They believe Democrat socialism. They don't know what it is. It's probably going to suck, but they're all in, because they're, quite frankly, I think they're doing it as a tantrum. I think the people voting for Mamdani, like, listen to the way the right talks about him and says, I like that. I like the way that this makes them mad. I think it's a temper tantrum. And, I can't say that we're ready as a country to hug it out with the other side. I mean, the political violence threats are off the charts, the risk of civil war. And it's like, well, that's not a status quo thing. And so we don't know what like a non-status quo Republican Party looks like, even though we've had 10 years of Trump. And now's the time.
Yeah. Look, I think I'm going to have you back, because as we talk about the shutdown and as we careen into the midterms, I think you're right. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we just sweep under the rug. I'm with you on the filibuster. I'm like, what? It's like, I'm so tired of the excuses. Well, we can't do this because, or this won't do this. And I'm like, guys, one of the things that Donald Trump got right is he said, screw it, I'm willing to fight for you. And this establishment view that like, oh, it'll never work, or the Dems will do, it's like, then show us you're trying, but we're not connecting the dots right now. Yeah. I appreciate you being with us. We're going to have to keep this conversation going, because there's so much that I think people need to understand where the pulse is. So thanks for being here. We'll follow this up very soon, because I think there's a lot bigger of a conversation that we need to have.
Yeah, appreciate being here. I hope I didn't make your audience go get a drink. We
need to hear. We need to get a dose of reality, and that's the beauty of what you're bringing. And I don't want to get people's hopes up when they should be focused on what we need to do to change things. So thank you.
Great to be here. Thanks so much.
You bet. thanks to Mark for that. That gave us a lot to think about. I am going to have him back real soon because this is a bigger, broader conversation that we have to have. But Curtis Houck from the Media Research Center is going to break down the media take on everything that we saw last night, plus KJP's book. Yeah, he's got a take on that thing as well. So without further ado, the managing editor of Newsbusters over there at the Media Research Center, Curtis Houck. Curtis, good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no problem, my friend. Good to be with you.
All right, you guys do this for a living, so I need to get your take, little sanity check, because maybe I'm just being a little too sensitive today. But I felt like the election coverage was like normal left-wing legacy media. They overlooked like all of these associations. They were like, despite the text that Jay Jones sent, it wasn't like he sent a text like, hey, do you want to go to lunch? And Zohran Mamdani hangs out with terrorists, and they were like, they celebrated these guys and not acknowledged who they really were. Maybe I'm being sensitive, but I just felt like they were getting a pass on the left for all these people. If this was the right, they'd say Republicans tonight are elected far right-wing crazy nut jobs. And they were like, Zohran Mamdani's having a great night. And I'm like, okay, but he's a crazy leftist, terrorized, sympathizing communist.
Yeah, let's work backwards on here. On the labeling, you're exactly right. I mean, this moderate nonsense with Abigail Spanberger and Mikie Sherrill. Yes, compared to Zohran Mamdani, obviously, they're not like fellow communists talking about seizing the means of production and globalize the intifada. But, it's more about they dress it up in a nice way. Abigail Spanberger's ads, you saw them, Sean. She was talking about, we want the best schools and we want to take politics out of schools. And I serve this country and I'm all about service. It was the kind of folksy, moderate hoodwink nonsense that we've come to know and see from everybody from Abigail Spanberger to Mark Warner to even people like little Chris Coons over the years. And voters just bought that. Expectations. Virginia and New Jersey, I think a lot of Republicans, just because of how well the president did last year, historically well, and how, again, historically well and well run and much of a unicorn Governor Youngkin was in 2021, people just have these unrealistic expectations about Virginia and New Jersey. Some of us are old enough to remember 2017 and 2013 and other previous Virginia gubernatorial elections in particular that did not go well for Republicans, regardless of how good the candidate was, Ed Gillespie, or the flaws, or how close certain people got, like Ken Cuccinelli and the prevalence of the third party in that year. But just a variety of factors should lead people to conclude that Democrats were supposed to win. They did win. The Jay Jones part is the most disturbing thing, obviously, because the media definitely downplayed this on the national broadcast networks that we saw. There were maybe two pieces on mentions on Meet the Press, one on ABC's This Week, one or two on Nightly News, and maybe one on CBS. But all told, if you add all those things up, it was probably less than 3 or 4 minutes before Election Day. And so because of that, it's not really in the public zeitgeist about what Jay Jones did. And as you point out, when they do talk about it, it was very much downplayed and minimized to make it seem like he just called someone an idiot instead of, I'm going to kill these people and I'm going to kill their kids.
Right. And I look at what's going on every time someone on the right meets with somebody, right? President Trump had dinner with Nick Fuentes back in the day. Nobody could, he had to know, and this was a big deal. Okay. And everybody downplayed the possibility. I mean, if you think about the circumstances, and maybe he should have known or not, I'm not debating that. But then you have Zohran Mamdani palling around with unindicted co-conspirators from 9/11, and no one in the media, I mean, that in of all places, New York City, should be a big deal. Someone should say, here's the guy who's doing it. A Republican meets with anybody, and they say, do you know who that person is, and how did they possibly associate with them? And yet, here's Zohran Mamdani literally palling around with terrorist sympathizers, and and it's actually almost the opposite, which is, the guy really wasn't actually ever indicted, and it's like, okay, but
or I meet with a lot of politicians meet with a lot of people, those kinds of excuses. I mean, the double standard here is so stark, and I'm glad you brought that up in terms of bias by omission. You know this too, Sean, that sometimes the worst kind of bias you get from the liberal elite media is the stories that aren't covered, the things that you don't see. And in that case, that told and spoke 1,000 words for what the liberal media were willing to do. They downplayed Zohran Mamdani. They had a little bit of love for him after he won the primary, but otherwise it kind of tampered down. Obviously, candidate quality matters as well. Andrew Cuomo, Curtis Silva, it was not. It was two really not great options for people who didn't want to vote for Zohran Mamdani. Winsome Sears was a huge drag on the ticket. She was way behind on the money race in Virginia as well. Sherrill was definitely more of a disappointment because the thinking was that it could be close. He almost won last time with very little national support from the GOP apparatus. But I do have to say, though, yes, while there are lessons and Republicans shouldn't rest on their laurels, the liberal media, as usual, Sean, take the very elementary view of things, believing that this is a harbinger, this is a clarion call for Democrats, that this is going to be a blue tsunami next year. The world, for all we know, is going to be a completely different place, and you cannot allow the George Stephanopouloses of the world to defeat and kind of beat you into submission and try to lower your expectations for next year.
I agree. I mean, I've been saying this for a while, whether or not we won or not, the idea that you're going to extrapolate 2 states in a year before an election and say, this is how they did. Candidate quality doesn't matter. I actually agree with your assessment. Sherrill to me was the disappointment because he actually had seemingly run a good campaign. Winsome didn't raise the money. She wasn't campaigning effectively. Youngkin, I don't think did his job. In fact, he probably, screwed things up a bit in terms of party unity by making a faux controversy regarding John Reed, the lieutenant governor. But I like the point you make about somehow Abigail Spanberger and Mikie Sherrill in New Jersey are branded immediately as moderates. What I don't understand, and that's the new talking point. They're the moderates. Yes, your point is well taken, maybe compared to Mamdani. But these are folks that voted with Pelosi 99% of the time. They support all of the trans agenda. In Virginia, Spanberger would refuse to discuss her position about this because, again, I think that she's been very clear about her support for it. They're not moderates. The press wants to help them by branding them moderates.
Exactly. And because they know that going to the far left outside of New York City is toxic. Yes, okay, it's a very low bar to clear that Mikie Sherrill and Abigail Spanberger aren't going to be bringing government-run grocery stores to New Jersey and Virginia or make buses free statewide, obviously. But they're still going to be doing all kinds of things. There are answers on the transgender issues you brought up, the gerrymander, the possible 10-to-1 split that Virginia Democrats, if they really wanted to go for broke, could very well draw out all Republicans except Morgan Griffin in the Southwest Virginia. I mean, it's disgusting what's going to happen here. And I think the undermentioned part of this last night is now that Virginia Democrats in the House of Delegates have over 60 seats. I believe it's going to be something like 64 seats by the time it's said and done out of 100, which, again, could reach extinction levels if Republicans aren't willing to regroup for next year and the year after that, because, it could get bad really quick. And, all the moniker jokes that we may make about California, bringing California to Virginia, we'll see in January what the Democrats do here. And it's concerning, too, with Jay Jones in this era of political threats, political violence, what he will do in terms of being the top prosecutor in Virginia if, God forbid, something like another Charlie Kirk assassination happened, what he would do to defend, people he disagrees with.
No, he'll defend the indefensible. I mean, I think we've seen it. I mean, the guy kicked a dog yesterday, Curtis. There's a video of
unbelievable kicking
a dog. The funny part is you mentioned what's going on in Virginia, which I find appalling in the sense that, look, both sides gerrymander. I don't, to me, this idea that it's bad. But what Virginia did was sneaky, meaning that Virginia had early voting started in September. People cast their vote for the House of Delegates. And then days before the election, they had a special election to comply with Virginia law, which allows you, it says you have to pass something in one session of the General Assembly, have an election intervene, and then pass it again. And so they were like, hey, we can be cute by half. And that's how they're going to redistrict. And I think that was a travesty because Virginia voters didn't realize that was on the ballot. And so that's the thing. You talk about this, though. I was listening to Gavin Newsom. He keeps referring to the win in California because the Republicans and President Trump were rigging the election. They get away with that. If Republicans use the word rig, we get called out for it. That's ridiculous. That's undermining democracy, et cetera, et cetera. When Gavin Newsom uses the word rig, it's like, oh, yeah, I guess it's different when you guys do it.
Well, yeah, and also the talk that we've seen on places like The View and MSNBC or MS Now, as of a few Saturdays from now, talking about canceling the election. President Trump using the National Guard and all these blue cities as a dry run to somehow cancel elections. And, I guess these victories mean that he'll definitely try to cancel the elections. And again, if my boss Tim Graham were sitting here, he would say, "Where are the fact checkers on this? They're never going to be fact checked when they use the R word about rigged, or talking about canceling the elections or ending our democracy." This kind of incendiary, doomsday, apocalyptic rhetoric is only going to further inflame their own base. And of course, as I've just said, it's not based in reality at all.
No. I guess the question, though, is that, it's funny, you guys at the Media Research Center and Newsbusters call these guys out. But Nancy Pelosi was on, she did this interview on CNN, and she said Trump is the greatest threat because he's destroying the courts and he's gotten rid of the House of Representatives. And the reporter didn't push back. I mean, those are demonstrably false things. They're not true, right? For obvious reasons. The court is 6-3, so it's obviously leans conservative. The House of Representatives controlled by the Republicans. I don't sign the shutdown, but to lie and to say he got rid of them or he destroyed them, and the reporter didn't push it back. So the question I have for you is, have we become numb to the media's bias, or should we be calling it out more?
I think especially when it comes to dangerous, incendiary rhetoric like this, talking about fascism, comparing Republicans to Nazis, these kinds of things require vigorous pushback. Need to talk about how this kind of language is unacceptable in our body politic. Just as we're having the family discussion about anti-Semitism, I think on the left, you have to be so strenuous, you have to be forceful, because this kind of thing is not acceptable. Because as we know, words matter. The left tells us that all the time. Well, if words do matter, we need to be going around and talking about not necessarily censoring, but we need to be calling it out and creating an incentive structure for people to not want to listen to this kind of thing. And thankfully, in places like late night comedies, we found where 95% of the New York City mayoral race comments and jokes were about Silwa and Cuomo, not Mamdani. It's not a moneymaker. We saw with Colbert's cancellation, the reports from Dylan Byers and Puck and others that they're losing over $100 million a year. And I'm sure Jimmy Kimmel probably isn't printing money either. So fortunately, that segment of the liberal media apparatus is falling apart. Now we just kind of need to see what happens with some of these other places, as well as the newspapers obviously have fallen away for a long time as well, except for maybe like the New York Times.
All right. I said that because I was watching President Trump on CBS 60 Minutes, and you have to watch the whole clip, which the White House posted, not the 27 minutes edited. Here's an exchange he had with Norah O'Donnell on crime, though, that I thought was absolutely fascinating, and to the point that I asked you. Take a look at how he addressed the issue of crime.
But we're cleaning up our cities. I campaigned on crime, but I've done a much better job on crime than I thought. The crime numbers are way down, even though we have a lot more people in our country that really shouldn't be here, and many of them are stone cold, hard criminals. When I look at D.C. now, you can walk down the middle of the street. You can have your daughter, who's 10 years old, meet you at the park. She's going to be okay.
In
she
certain
would have
parts
been
of
murdered.
D.C.
Well,
I live
almost,
in D.C.
Well,
certain parts
you
of
tell
DC.
me, how big a difference is D.C. now compared to what it was a year ago? Right? I mean, you have to be honest with me. People in the White House, they walk up to me, young ladies I've never seen, sir, thank you very much. I know they don't even have to tell me what they're thanking me for. But when I ask why, he said, one girl said, I'd get into Uber, and I felt dangerous even in Uber. They'd attack the car, okay? It wasn't even safe then. Sir, I now walk to work every day, and I'm so safe. There's nothing going to happen, 100% safe. And you know that too, Nora.
I want to ask you about
You live here, you know that too.
I want to ask you about
Do you see a difference?
American
Do you
cities
see a difference?
in Washington, D.C.
Yes.
I think I've been working too hard. I haven't been out and about
Oh, that's
that much.
not a fair answer. You see a difference.
I get in my car and
Okay,
go
that's
to
a
work
good
and I
answer.
go home.
You don't have to use that one. Don't worry. Don't worry. I don't want to embarrass
I've been
her.
working too hard.
It's like, you know what the
Yeah.
difference is? Like day and night.
So, Curtis, I appreciate you guys posting that at Media Research Center. But the beauty was, let me start with the proposition. Mr. President, crimes, da-da-da-da, only in certain neighborhoods. Okay, Nora, do you see it? Well, I don't really get out. So I'm going to tell you you're wrong, Then when he calls her on it, and he wouldn't, what I loved about this, because most politicians won't do this, he kept going. Tell me, do you see it? Do you see it? Because she said it factually. It's not in all neighborhoods, Mr. President. And he said, well, do you see it? Well, I don't actually know it because I probably get chauffeur driven to work every day. Right. So that's the missing piece in this, Curtis. She said it factually. This is not true. And when he called her out on it, she was like, well, I actually don't know the truth.
Yeah, isn't that incredible? This is the way how the president has completely revolutionized the way that Republicans should engage with the liberal media the very few times that they actually do. Norah O'Donnell tried to swat away his point when he brought up crime in D.C. by saying, well, I don't know, only in certain neighborhoods. But he kept going, as you point out. He kept hammering and hammering and hammering. You would often see this probably in your many years dealing with the press. Journalists would say, well, that's not for me to say if you tried to ask them a question. But the president kept getting after her. And then she, as you pointed, she changed her tone by saying, well, I work too hard. John, she doesn't anchor the CBS Evening News anymore. She doesn't have like a consistent show. She's not hosting a streaming show. She's not hosting 60 Minutes. I mean, yeah, she has a book that's coming out.
I didn't even think of, by the way, I didn't even think of that aspect of it, Curtis. You're absolutely right.
No, she's not even, so it's not like she has like a regular show to do. I mean, she's already written the book. The book is, being printed for early next year or later this year. So it's not like she has like a steady day job where she goes to work and is in meetings and then on camera all the time, sitting in a studio. The entire point of getting rid of that is so that she can kind of jet set travel all around the world and spend more time with her kids. So that ostensibly would put her more out there. And her husband, Jeff Tracy, runs restaurants in DC. So, I mean, she's married to someone who is in touch and has to be in touch with kind of the mood and the vibe of the city.
And the safety. And the safety.
To that.
Right. I mean, do you not think at some point, like considering DC, you're bringing up a lot of points that I didn't even think of, right? So let's be honest. She says, first of all, she lies, right? Because she says the crime isn't in every neighborhood. And then he says, well, what about you? And she goes, well, I actually don't know because I don't see anything because I get driven back and forth. Secondly, to your point, what are you actually so busy on doing? Because you got a lot of your responsibility slipped away. So what is it that you do? And then third, to your point, and I don't like to bring in spouses to this discussion, but you're right. Her husband has a plethora of very good restaurants in the DC area. I would imagine that this is a guy who comes home and says, you're not going to believe this. It's so much safer on the streets. More people are coming in. More people are commenting that they can walk in or out. I mean, like, right. I have asked that when I've gone. Right. So it's just funny how that never happened. But again, this is why I was asking you about calling it out, because I don't think the average person, and our exchange is emblematic of this. Like, I didn't think of the things that you just called out. And I'm like, wow, that's even more true than I thought for obvious reasons. Mm-hmm. I want to talk to you about Corinne Jean-Pierre, not because I want to, but because I think she did a series of interviews on this failed book, which, by the way, we need to congratulate her for cracking the top 25,000 of all books last week. That's a huge feat. But she was doing a series of interviews, and as you know, she kept getting called out for leading every interview with, well, as a black queer woman, right? And enough people were noticing the pattern. Finally, she brought it up, Curtis. I want to play you what she had to say to people who have noticed this pattern of how she starts every interview. Take a look.
Pisses me off that people who have not walked in my shoes, who have no idea who really I am as a person, get to tell me how I get to identify myself or
Jake?
not. So it's like,
shut up.
I was like, you can't tell me how I get to identify myself. You can't tell me how I get to call myself. Like, screw you. Like, that's not okay. Like, that is not okay. Mm-hmm. You have no right to tell anybody how they should identify themselves and how they see themselves in the world. Like, you have not walked through my battles. You have not walked through my life. You don't even know my personal story. So that's how that just boils me up.
That was like that old, you don't know me. But here's the point. I think that there's a difference. We're pointing out the fact that she began every interview. If she began every interview by saying, like, I just want to start by, like Kamala Harris, we called out the fact that she kept saying 107 days as if that was the reason she lost, right? We're calling out the obvious, which is she starts every interview by saying, well, as a queer black woman. And it's like, okay, somehow that's Like, that's how you're starting every interview. That's a pattern that is being discussed. She has every right to say it. I'm not saying she can't, but I think it's kind of obvious that, like, she wants to lead with that everywhere she goes.
Yeah, we as conservatives believe you can say what you want, but that doesn't absolve you then from us ridiculing you. Karine Jean-Pierre is if you like created someone in a DEI lab with all sorts of mishigas and all the sort of jargon, and you just rolled them out and tried to see how well that goes in the public. I read her book. It was so flimsy. It was only 172 pages. I mean, just absolutely remarkable. As I said in my review at Newsbusters, it was vapid. It was empty. It was the single worst political book I've ever read. It was so disorganized. She starts going after Nancy Pelosi, but then leaves it by the wayside to start talking about the infrastructure law and the PACT Act and all these other pieces of legislation passed during the Biden presidency. And then she returns to Nancy Pelosi. So just in terms of her like structural or lack of editing, it was just so elementary. And she was so divisive as well. And you could tell in that clip, she was so dismissive of people who try to raise any sort of criticism of her. She tries to make it about race when really it's about her competency. So much of what you have is, Sean, at a podium or just talking to reporters is your respect and your credibility and your command of the facts. It was clear that the White House press corps did not respect her. You watch so many times during the Biden years, the press were willing to be on her side, but they just wanted some, bread and crumbs to work with. And she could not do that because every briefing was a heavyweight bout with the English language. Whereas when John Kirby was at the podium, he answered questions. You may not have liked his answer, but he gave answers, and you could tell the press corps respected him and they got along with him because Karine just seemed like a very nasty person. She writes about how conservatives in her book would come, random conservatives, and Peter Doocy and others were nice to her. And she scoffs at that, is saying that these people must have ulterior motives, that these people must not really mean it or something like that, because, they're trying to throw me off, instead of considering the fact that we're willing to see inherent value in all human beings, regardless of their political beliefs. And that just goes to the incendiary and insidious nature of the way the far left operates.
Dude, I love that. First of all, thank you for reading it so I don't have to. Because I normally will read almost any political book just to kind of get a perspective on somebody else's take. But thank you, because I've heard this now twice, that this is just a joke of a book. So thank you for saving me some time. But the irony is that, oh my God, they're nice, so they must have some other motive. Anyway, Curtis, thank you for being with us. I appreciate everything you guys over at Newsbusters and the Media Research Center do to call out the hypocrisy, the bias, and everything else. Thanks for that.
Thanks, Sean.
You bet. Thanks for being with us, guys. Great new column out at SeanSpicer.com that you can go to and check out. Obviously, great to sign up. Thanks for everything you can do to promote the show. We've got a great panel tomorrow, and then Victor Davis Hanson on Friday, which means that you should subscribe, hit that notification button, and share the show with as many people as possible. We'll see you back here tomorrow on The Sean Spicer Show. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.